I want to welcome you to the Pro Mindset Podcast. The Pro Mindset Podcast is all about diving into the headspace that results in championship performance. High-performing athletes, winners, have this mental flow and have a positive headspace for their performances and success. Join me, Craig Domann, sports attorney and NFL agent, on this podcast. I will interview pro athletes, college athletes, football coaches, and sports personalities. Together, we can discover how you can get in the flow and have your own pro mindset. Okay, I want to welcome a special guest today, Rich Griffith. Played in the NFL for 9 years.
Seven. I'll take 9 though. That was beautiful. In my heart, it was 10.
Yeah, you would love the retirement benefits for 10.
Oh my gosh!
And they keep going up.
Really?
They do.
Okay.
Yeah, the new CBA is going to make them go up again. I want to get started by just asking you to share your background, where you're from. Obviously, you went to the University of Arizona.
Grew up in Tucson, Arizona, and that was home for me. I'm an only child, very loving, supportive family, and then my parents were at every game. I kind of wanted to be a basketball player more. I grew fast. Some of the elementary, middle schools that I went to didn't have football, and so basketball was my thing. And so I was always on the court. I always wanted to be around other athletes because I didn't have brothers or sisters, so it was teammates was my thing. And then I had a chance to go into high school and play football for the very first time. And it was almost like the light bulb came on. It was almost like in my heart, a passion began to blossom. And I love the game. Now, we lost every game. I mean, every game.
Every game. In high school.
Freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, we were horrible. We were doormats. We prided ourselves of, we're going to lose this game, but we're going to bloody the other team.
So how did you get a scholarship to college?
It's so fascinating. And so scouts would be looking at our opponent. And so we would have a good game. More importantly, I would have a good game against my opponent and dominate. And even though we lost the game, I had success. And then it began to just be a snowball because I had size in high school and 6'5", some good strength and some good speed. I had chances at all the Pac-10 schools then. Mm-hmm. Back then it was Pac-10.
At least it wasn't Pac-8.
Iowa, Nebraska, some of Illinois, and some of those other teams. But I took some official visits in the dead of winter. Again, I grew up in Arizona, and I just said, there's no way I'm handling this. I can enjoy this great weather and play right at home. And
Mom and Dad can go to the games.
Exactly.
You're going to your hometown university. You played in a high school program that wasn't very successful. What was the biggest adjustment going from high school to college for you?
See, I would say that's where a lot of my faith was a huge piece because God enabled me to make transition. I mean, I was scared to death going from, man, have I even proved myself? We've lost every game in high school. Now I'm going to a major college. And yet God gave me the ability to begin to transition. And seeing just by hard work, dedication, passion, I love this game. And if I begin to put those things, dedication, hard work, passion onto the field, good things begin to happen. I was able to start my redshirt freshman year and got freshman All-American on the team. And so it was just kind of fun to see that. But it was, again, just part of that prowess of saying, am I willing to give everything I've got? And it was just that simple. If this is my role and I love what I do, am I willing to give everything that I have? Now, from a faith standpoint, that's what God asks of us. If I've given you an ability or a talent, use it to all your ability, okay? But the key to that is to God and not to man. So it's easy to do it for your coach. But if my perspective is God, and I'll never forget, Reggie White, the minister of defense, but how he played with passion. He says, my standards, God's standards. My coach may have a high standard, but God's standards are higher. And so I kind of took that approach of if I'm representing my faith and more importantly, my God, then how am I playing this game with good attitude, with passion, with perseverance? And you know what? You're going to have obstacles. And I'm going to overcome those obstacles because, again, I'm representing someone bigger. It's easy to get caught in tunnel vision. How many games are we winning? How much success are we having? Will I have a chance at the next level to continue to play? Those, to be honest, are mute points to the spectrum of life. And you and I know this. I mean, professional sports is such a fleeting business. I mean, to have a chance is that 1%.
No question about it. And representing players for almost 30 years, one of the things that I've found is that exit stage left always happens before the players are ready.
Yes, it does.
Okay. And typically they don't see it coming. Every now and then you have a guy that's highly paid, maybe not performing up to his contract, but most of the time players don't see it coming.
I would say I was playing my best football and I was in a good position and I was being an asset to the team when I was playing professionally. But I got the phone call saying we're making a decision to go a different direction. And it was that cold ice feeling that you get to your veins of like, is this it? Takes your breath away a little bit of just like, wow, okay.
Well,
didn't see that coming.
We're jumping way ahead, but I'm going to jump right in. How many times were you cut?
Once. Well, really twice because of the last ending of your career. But okay. Once.
So, during your career. Mm-hmm. What was your go-to when you got cut? Where did you go? I mean, was it your faith? Was it you married at the time?
I was.
Okay. So how did you process that when you experienced failure for the first time in the NFL?
I'm processing a lot of emotions because everything in the world was going through my mind at that time. I had given everything I could give, and I was not playing well. So here you are, you're putting everything you can into trying to be successful, and yet it was not working out. So this was at the New England Patriots. Bill Parcells, 1993. I was drafted by the Patriots, and so I was a fifth rounder for them. Had a lot of opportunity, and then that first year, I was, in a sense, being redshirted again. I was developmental, meaning I was on the practice squad, but I was just kind of riding the bench. Second year, I was dealing with some injury issues, but then things were not clicking. And Parcells was here to build a team, and I became disposable. And so I felt in my heart, yes, that I was a failure. And so I gave everything I could, and it wasn't good enough. So do I even have what it takes to play in this game? Was I only given a 1 year opportunity, and that's it? So yeah, a lot of question marks. I did go to my faith. I did go to my wife and just say, how do we process through this? And Bill Parcells, and again, I would have nothing but positive things to say. He's a hard coach. He's a very good coach. But the last thing he said to me in his office when he's saying, we're letting you go, which is, again, that hard swallow, really, this is the reality, is, Rich, you did everything we asked you to do. This is a decision we're making. He says, but if I were you, I've seen a lot of players come through this office. If I were you, I would go ahead and hang up the cleats. And it's almost like your whole world comes crashing in, because since 8th grade and that passion to play football for the first time going into high school, saying, man, I'm suiting it up next year. I cannot wait. And then to see success, even though it was a bad team, instant success. And like, I love this game. College and some of the details of that. And then the NFL and a chance to do it. And then it doesn't work. And so in your heart, you're like, my whole world up to this point has been about football. Yes, a strong faith, but it's also my job, my vocation has been about being a football player. And then to say, yeah, but you don't have what it takes. There's a huge component to that of identity. And I learned a huge lesson, and it was that word, identity. I can easily be known as number 85. I can easily be known as a Patriot, but that is not my identity. I could be known as a tight end, and I could be known as how much success and catches and tackles I make. That's not my identity. My identity is my relationship with Jesus Christ. That's what determines my life trajectory, but also my purpose. And when you begin to look at that, my purpose was not to play on the Patriots. That was another job or another opportunity to reflect what? My faith, my passion for who Christ was. Now, just because that opportunity didn't work doesn't reflect on anything but how are you going to respond? So my response was not go in the tank. My response is, okay, God, what's next? Now, in my heart of hearts, I knew I needed one more chance. Now, that's hard in itself because a lot of players, you know very well, a lot of players don't get a second chance. You get one chance in the NFL, one team cuts you. Well, there's 29 other teams who are saying, well, we're not going to do that. We're not going to take a chance on you. Well, I had an opportunity to get another chance and to see that come through.
I would venture to say that, perhaps as many as, 30 to 40% of the guys that get cut never get another chance.
Yeah.
And what I think is remarkable is I've had a handful of clients that have been in the identical situation that you found yourself in. The head coach calls you in for an exit meeting, says thank you, but no thank you, but has to pour it on a little bit by saying, hey man, you don't have what it takes to play in this league. I'm trying to do you a favor by suggesting that you go get a real job. And so to me, that's when you're down on the mat. Yeah. And a lot of guys can't get off the mat. And Rob Ninkovich is someone that happened to him in Miami, where the head coach at the time called him in and did the identical same thing. And I called Rob after he got cut and said, hey, what'd he say? He says, I need to do something else. He says, I'm not cut. I don't have what it takes to play in the NFL. Why in the heck would these coaches take it upon themselves to project their vision for a young man's future when it goes against everything he's been working for 15, 20 years? In addition to your faith, what is the formula for success in bouncing back when you have people that don't believe in you? Because faith is number one, no question about it. But from a tactical standpoint, or from just getting up in the morning and calling your agent and say, hey, is anything happening? And that whole process. How do you rebuild your identity when the guy that's your boss, he's the head honcho in the whole organization, tells you you don't have it?
And I went specifically in that moment. Yes, it hurt. And yes, it was devastating. But you have to go back to where your strengths are. What are the things I'm good at? What enabled me to get into the NFL? Obviously, someone saw something. I had some ability. Now, how do you get back to building that confidence, but more importantly, building a next opportunity? Now, faith plays a lot of that. I believe strongly that God's the one that opens doors. But now, how do I use my ability and begin to put my best foot forward? One area that we don't address very often, though, is also looking at our weaknesses. And that's where the NFL, in fact, I appreciate it, and is even a bigger picture to this. The NFL will address your weaknesses. Obviously, I was not playing well, and a coach said, you know what, it's time to put it away. But look what happens every day after practice. You review film. You did this play well. You did not do this play well. You can have a better technique in your blocking. You can have a better technique in your tackling. We're always being evaluated. We're looking at not the successes per se. You're looking at your weaknesses. A lot of times when people are like, man, do you ever do anything right? Because yes, everything you can look at and say, you got to tweak this and have a little bit better performance on this. The point is, athletes are willing to look at their weaknesses, but look at it in your faith as well. We always want to put our best foot forward in our faith. Act like we've got our stuff together, but we don't. We want to look good. We want to walk into church. We want to walk into Bible studies like everything is just fine. And it's not. We're human beings. More importantly, we have a flesh. And the more we begin to try to hide our weaknesses, the more we're not being true to ourselves. And that is where my heart has come alive as a pastor, is how are we helping people address areas of their life that are not in a good place? Yeah, you're a follower of Jesus Christ. He has forgiven you. He has given you eternal life. He is restoring you. It's ongoing, restoring us. And when we allow ourselves to begin to address some weaknesses, as in everyday life experiences, meaning jobs, NFL, they will address those weaknesses. How do we do that in our real life? And so it was just a neat opportunity for me to say, I'm going to go back to those weaknesses and say, you know what? I want to make those weaknesses my strengths. So if I'm not tackling well, if I'm not blocking well, how do we begin to make that my strength? Again, a life lesson. Instead of having these issues of anger or dealing with pornography or dealing with just not treating my family well, what if we address those and those become our strengths? And in some ways, in those areas that we've had some major sin issues, those also become even a ministry. A person with anger issues or a person that has had a horrible time trusting people, they help people in those realms, and that becomes a ministry.
I see it all the time. You see people in the real world that have really been massive failures that have found the Lord, and that becomes their ministry because they become experts in that failure. Right. And you are absolutely correct. Football is a game where they don't count your mental geniuses, they count your mental errors.
Exactly.
Right? They talk about all your bad plays, all your miscues. And coaches look at, is it a mental mistake? Is it a physical mistake? Or is it a physical incapability issue.
He was just weaker. Or he
couldn't do it, right?
Exactly.
And so what they want to do is they want to eliminate all the mental mistakes because they know that not every time at every position on the field are they going to have the best physical.
Correct.
Player, right?
Yep.
One of the things that I have found that really characterizes the elite players is that they have a very high belief in themselves. They have a high passion for the game. They have a lifestyle that's consistent with that. And they have a huge faith component too.
Yeah.
And faith component comes in two places. One is faith in our Creator. And the second one is faith in self. Because if you have too much doubt, you are not going to be successful in the NFL.
Right.
And so everyone has that little voice talking on their shoulder that says something like, Rich, are you sure you can do this? Rich, you remember what Coach Parcells said? Rich, are you sure that doing all these workouts and putting all this effort into this is worth it? Because the guy that's probably recognized as one of the best coaches in the NFL at the time is saying you don't have the goods. And so what I found is that where there's darkness, there can't be light. There can only be one or the other, right? And when light shows up, darkness runs.
It's gone.
Right?
Exactly.
The same thing happens with doubt and faith. We all have a little doubting Thomas. And when we basically command the will of that doubt, and by faith, the doubt goes away. And so we'd all be, as an athlete, you'd all be in the insane asylum if you had this doubting Thomas talking to you all the time.
Yeah.
But it talks to you at the most critical times. It picks its spots. And so what I found is that players, they're either listening to that voice or they're commanding that voice. And you have a choice. And as an athlete, if you want to be a top performer, if you want to play in the NFL, number one, it's got to be in God's will. Number two, you have to have the physical characteristics that are necessary. But then you got to have that belief, that passion. You have to have a lifestyle that's consistent. Lifestyle is very important. Nutrition, schedule, routine, discipline, rehab, training, extra coaching, film study. I could go on and on and on. All those things, right?
Yep.
And then you also have to have faith.
I love how you brought up that aspect of doubt, because it is very much right one step away. In the most inopportune time, I was a tight end. I was also a long snapper. You've snapped 1,000 balls, and yet all of a sudden you get in the stance, you begin to get set, and there's a doubt. You're going to shoot it over his head. And so at that moment is critical. Am I going to trust in my technique? Am I going to trust in my ability? Or am I going to listen to the doubt? Because when we listen to that doubt, that puts a quiver of fear of what if.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say when you have those elite athletes, they get rid of the what ifs. Well, what if this happens? No, I'm not going to worry about what if. Yes, mistakes will happen, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'm definitely not going to dwell on it. And I'm going to go out there and cross that line, and I'm going to play as hard as I ever can. And that has just been even indicative to my career. If I'm willing to just lay it on the field, I will make mistakes, but I'm not going to let fear or doubt dictate that.
The key for a lot of guys to eliminate the what ifs is to make sure your lifestyle's in order.
Absolutely.
Because if you're getting your sleep, you're doing the right things, you're learning your playbook, you're earning the trust of your coach, you're staying after practice and working on your weaknesses, you can't let the what ifs come in. But if you're skirting on your lifestyle and you're carousing around at night and you're got multiple cell phones from multiple girls and you got all these things going on, the what ifs are going to destroy your career.
Absolutely.
Right? Let's talk about, you were with the Patriots, you've been with the Jaguars. Where else did you play?
So I'm going to take one step back. And so how I even got into the NFL. My junior year, I blew up my knee. Devastating, again, in the sense of now I can't play this game I love, but will I even have a chance to come back my senior year? Your junior year is very pivotal when it comes to, and you know this thing better, when it comes to scouts looking and saying, what's this next group of young college players coming up into the draft? Who's going to be seniors that we need to start looking at and such? And so I missed that junior year. So I come back my senior year and have a very average season, but a good season. It was the first time they took the NFL draft from 12 rounds to 7 rounds. And then they also cut in half. They used to bring everyone and their dog to Indianapolis to the combine. And now they began to be a lot more selective, and I didn't make that list. And so now I'm saying, I want to play in the NFL. I think I have an ability to play in the NFL. And now I'm seeing this opportunity begin to slip away. And so there was 2 opportunities at my school that had scouts would come and look at your numbers and begin to see just who you are as a player, and do you even make those lists. So those 2 opportunities, I had some really good numbers. I ran a good 40, ran good T-tests and shuttle runs, and did really well on the bench press, all those types of things. So even though I didn't make it to the combine, all of a sudden, again, like in high school, losing all those games, now also, who's Rich Griffith and why is he starting to percolate in this whole scheme? And so I went from not even being on the radar to maybe having a chance at a free agent to being drafted as a 5th rounder. And so it was just kind of fascinating how just, again, you can put everything into this, but am I willing to trust the process? And if it's God opening doors, however you want to look at that, it's just saying, you know what? I'm going to do my very best and trust that next step. And so I was drafted to New England. We've already talked about some of the New England piece and that being a great opportunity, but it just didn't work out. And now that realization of saying, do I get another chance? One good thing was in that 1994 season, I had to sit out. I got cut at the end of training camp and no other team picked me up. So 2 new teams were starting in the league, which was the Carolina Panthers and Jacksonville Jaguars. And so they were starting to begin to look at free agents and all those types of things in the 94 season. And then 95, January, the first of that new year, they were allowed to start their own little signing of players. And I was number 18 signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Tom Coughlin, which was a protege of Bill Parcells. And I'm like, am I crazy? Why would I go back to something like this? Goodness. And training camps were difficult and extremely hard with Bill Parcells. And believe it or not, they were even harder with Tom Coughlin. And then being an expansion team, we got not 4 weeks of training camp, we got 6 weeks of training camp. And so it literally took years off my life. I mean, we worked so hard, and it was just, and it was still that premise of, if you can't handle it, we got 5 guys that will take your position. And so every day I was coming to that realization, am I willing to have that steadfast spirit? This is a dream, but am I willing to just truly invest everything I have in this dream? But I got that second opportunity, where a lot of guys do not get a second opportunity to get on with another team. I got that, and then began to build within the Jacksonville Jaguars a home. And that's the difference of just trying to create some longevity within an NFL team, is find out, again, what you're good at, but find a home. Do it well and be consistent and allow the team to say, man, we can't live without Rich. Okay? We got some star players and we got all these things covered, but man, Rich is a bread and butter player. We got a number of these blue collar type guys that are just, we need them on this team. And we got to see a lot of really successful opportunities, some instant success with the Jaguars. In my 6 years there, 4 of them were playoffs, 2 of them were AFC championship games. And so got to see just finding a home, but also being able to use the NFL for a great opportunity.
Well, let's talk about second opportunities. And so what did you do differently the second time that you didn't do as a rookie and back in New England?
Yeah.
What was your mental approach to, because you gave everything in New England.
I gave it everything I had.
So you can't give any more. So what did you do differently?
So I changed my approach to, I mentioned the word pressing, which means I was trying so hard, I ended up making mistakes instead of being successful. And so I just said, you know what, I'm going to go back to enjoying football. I love to catch passes. I love to block and see a successful offensive play. I love special teams and being able to fly down the field and make a tackle. I mean, I began to go back to, why do I love this game? Problem was, and when you begin to get paid for this, you're like, back to the what ifs, what if I lose this? What if I get cut? It almost took the fun of being a game and said, no, I want to go back to enjoying this game of football. And that changed. I began to not press and say, yeah, I will make mental mistakes. I will make physical mistakes. But you know what? I'm going to make a heck of a lot of good plays too. And I'm going to have fun. And I'm going to believe in my teammates. And I'm going to invest as hard as I can in the guy next to me. And prayerfully, he's going to do the same into me. And we began to build a team. That's what was success. What was exciting to see that success. into being a part of that mix. So I changed, in a sense, my attitude and how I approached success versus failure, but also just enjoying the game. And how many guys would they say, I just love the game? How many guys have you said, I'd play for free? Well, you know what? You did for all these years until you got into the NFL. Why does that change?
Agree 100% that you got to keep the game, and it's got to be fun, even though it is a business. And even though you're getting paid to go to work and you're getting paid to win, paid to be successful, paid to beat the opponent, arguably paid to win a Lombardi trophy for your organization.
Yeah.
The players that do the best typically are the ones that have a lot of things in place, but they really enjoy the game for the game. Yeah. And it's a lot easier to do that after you have a big contract, right?
Well,
and you've got security. But you almost have to fake it till you make it when you're younger as a player. In that, you know what? I'm going to keep the main thing. And when you start chasing money, that's the beginning of the end of your career.
I would agree.
Because you can't chase the money.
One other piece I'd add to that is what helps you stay in the NFL and helps keep that momentum going. And this is what worked for me. But an NFL player, to me, he's mastered the basics. What set me apart was I was so good at those little detail things of mastering the basics of how to catch a pass, mastering on how to take the right steps on a block, how to take those right steps and angle on a tackle. I began to master the basics. Not only are you having fun because you're playing well, but you also, you're a student of the game. You've mastered the basics, not the big plays. Those are going to happen because you're an athlete. You're going to make big plays. You're going to see good things happen. But are you good at the little things and being consistent when no one else is watching? That's what began to set me apart in year 4 and 5 and 6. When you got a younger guy coming in wanting to take your position, well, I had more consistency because I mastered those little things. I paid attention to the little things. And that's where they say the veteran savvy, if you will. Well, but it means a lot because that's what keeps you alive in the NFL.
One of the ways I would describe what you just said is that mastering the basics raises your floor. So if every player has a ceiling and a floor in their career, the way you raise your ceiling is you make big plays. But sometimes you don't even get an opportunity in a game to make a big play. But the way you build security is by raising or getting your floor higher.
Correct.
And that comes from fundamentals, comes from dependability, reliability.
The game's on the line. Are you going to show up? And a lot of coaches would have question marks on guys. Yeah, they're a good athlete. They make big plays, but how many big mistakes are they going to be making as well? That costs the team. And as you continue down, and of course, the later in the season, games get very costly, especially that first wild card game and that first playoff game, and then the AFC, NFC championship game. Oh my goodness, that just elevates. And you talk about the ceiling. I've got to be playing at the highest level I can, and I've got to be as consistent as I can because one play could literally be the game.
It always does. It always hinges on one play. In the Final Four this year, in the semifinals, there was a foul against Guy at Virginia, where he, was shooting a 3-pointer. He won the game by sinking three free throws because of one play that defined the game. That wasn't the game, but that was the defining play of the game. Sticking with the theme of defining moments, guys make like pivots in their career. They make like shifts of some nature where they elevate their maturity. Maybe they get married. There's something typically that happens off the field where they become more serious about their craft. And then there's also times where players do the opposite. Things are going really well. They start taking things for granted. And then all of a sudden, they make a pivot to the wrong direction and the team's looking to replace them. What do you see, just off the top of your head, as some of those pivot points for NFL players?
There are distractions at any point. And guys are going to begin to gravitate toward anything that allures them. Mm-hmm. So I'm playing, and I love this game of football, but man, I still have passions in life, and so I'm going to pursue some other things. It could be women, it could be drugs or alcohol, it could be other hobbies. I've seen guys, get the most tricked out motorcycles available because they just want something that gives them another thrill. Again, back to just what's grounding you, that's where, and even my time with the Jaguars, we had upwards of 25 guys on our team that were followers of Christ, which is in some ways unheard of. We were able to guard each other, look at weaknesses of guys and say, why are you headed down that path? So we were able to help guys in that time as opposed to just letting guys go to some train wrecks. We've seen, some horrible divorces that guys went through, just relationship train wrecks, but all that becomes a distraction to what they really want to do on the field. And so the longer you're in this game, the more opportunities you begin to let that guard down a little bit. As the years begin to stack on and you have phenomenal success, but you have to begin to guard those weak areas or those blind spots in your life. That's where having brothers around you saying, man, Rich, I know your heart, but you got to guard that. And that's life issues as well. Do we have people or teammates that are walking with us that are guarding some of our blind spots? And I want that. I've had the privilege of being a pastor for the past 19 years. Is anyone guarding my blind spots? I want that because I am just as susceptible as anyone else to falling.
Right.
And the hard thing about professional sports, and I'm talking about across the board, you're in the limelight, and it's even worse today than when I played. I mean, with social media, every comment you make, every little tweet, it's examined, and I don't know how a lot of these guys handle, just that distraction in itself. And so coaches want you to be there just for football, but that's not a reality. And guys have a life beyond football. But looking at even a bigger perspective, we have a life of purpose. How are we approaching that? And if we can allow this distraction and this influence and this other weakness in our life, oh man, what are we standing for? You can be a great athlete, but man, what are you standing for? And just in a very specific way, are you being a good influence? We've heard those sayings where I don't want to be an influence. I don't want to be a role model. But you know what? You can't help it. You're thrust into that. If you want to be a professional athlete, you want to be a movie entertainer, you want to be a musical entertainer, you're thrust into an atmosphere where people are watching you. And if people are watching you, you're influencing either positively or negatively.
Well, one of the things that I see about the NFL game is that there's typically pressure points during the course of a season, during the course of a game. And pressure reveals character.
Oh, man.
Pressure reveals how well you know the playbook. Pressure reveals how you handle coaching and how do you handle your relationships with your teammates. So when you think of pressure, snapping a field goal snap for a game-winning field goal, there's some pressure. Most of the pressure's on you and on the kicker.
Absolutely. And
you could argue the holder, and then you could argue the blockers, but you're holding the ball. You start the play with the ball. So how did you handle pressure?
I learned that verbatim in New England with Bill Parcells. He was masterful, and even on the practice field, of creating pressure to see how guys would respond. And he would do everything he could to see how guys deal with this aspect of you're either going to be successful or you're going to not be reliable. And he wanted to see what guys would step up or elevate their game and which guys could not. Now, the key to that one is, in those moments, are you willing to be coachable? So he is in your face. He is berating. He is trying to do everything he can to get into your psyche, but how will you respond? And I see that as being, are you able to be coachable and saying, I'm going to handle this pressure, and more importantly, I'm going to do what he's asking and do it precisely the way he's asking. But the more you can embrace that pressure and the more that pressure can become familiar, when it comes to a game, I'm ready to respond. When it even comes to the playoffs and that every game elevates, as we were talking earlier, every game elevates. You talk about pressure, but you've already practiced it. So you're like, oh, this is familiar. I don't like it. It's difficult. I'm still putting everything I have into it, but I'm familiar with that.
One of the things that you're describing is becoming comfortable being under pressure. And so as you get more mature, more dedicated, more disciplined, all those things, you can actually become comfortable being uncomfortable, comfortable being under pressure, because that's where a lot of the big plays are made.
I was just going to say that. That's when great things happen because you're able to now take advantages of unique opportunities. By handling pressure and not allowing that to overcome you, I'm now more in tune to my environment, and I'm more in tune to making a play. And that's the cool thing.
What is one of your fondest memories of playing in the NFL?
Wow. Well, now that I have to look in the rearview mirror, my biggest memory is the teammates. I love playing with a number of these guys. And that brought back some phenomenal just memories in the locker room, but also some of the success that when we truly played well together, in some cases we were unstoppable. And there was a bond that happened in those first 6 years that it was pretty special. That aspect of being a part. Now, yeah, you've had some cool plays, a catch against Pittsburgh, a touchdown against the Rams. I mean, there's some memories, but I miss the players. I miss training with the guys. So yeah, playing a game was great, but I missed what it took in the off season and us going in the weight room together. And man, we're working hard, but we're laughing together and we're building stronger friendships. Then we go out and we play golf together. And there were some bonds and some relationships that were second to none. But I miss that training piece. And now as an old guy and my body doesn't work as well, I miss that dedicated training time where you were putting everything you can to building your body up. It was also cool at the end of that off season, you begin to start training camp, you knew you were ready for the season. And you knew, and you'd watch the guy next to you and he's ready for the season. You'd made that investment together. I miss that. You don't get that a lot in life, of people knowing that they have invested and you've done this together.
Well, one of the things that people don't talk a lot about, but you just hit on a little bit, is the intimacy of the relationships and the brotherhood in the locker rooms. And in the real world, you just can't duplicate that.
No.
You don't have the time together. You don't have a singular mission together. If you work for a company, everybody's doing their own thing. But in the football locker room, everybody's focused on one thing.
Yeah.
It's one team, one heartbeat typically, and they're all about winning together. Football is one of those team sports where you can have a couple great players, but if you don't have a team, you're not going to win.
Correct.
Right? Being a guest on Pro Mindset, what I'm wanting to do is dive into the headspace of elite performers. And so when you look back on your career and the players that you played with, what would you say, is the secret to success in the mental space for an NFL player?
I'm going to pull my faith card because that was everything to my motivation. So a follower of Christ, before I got any success in sports, but that was a grounding piece of knowing who I was beyond any game. And so, high school is for 4 years. College is for 4 to 5 years, depending on redshirt. The NFL or any professional sport is a big question mark. You have no idea if you're going to play 1 or you're going to play 10. And so what's your grounding piece beyond football, beyond a sport? And so that was what triggered me for my success, was this is who I am and who I represent is so much bigger than the game of football. So I gave me a perspective. I'm in this for a much bigger reason. God gave me what I could handle. Was I willing to be content in my situation? Yeah, there's those that are willing to be are able to be the starters and are able to be the great success players, and they're the 1 or 2 top players on that team. But there's also 25, 30 guys that are consistent blue-collar guys. Was I willing to be content in my circumstance? And so was I willing to have a great attitude and persevere and have dedication? Secrets to success is being content in your situation. That doesn't mean you're going to stay in that situation, but are you willing to be content? Doesn't mean you don't work hard. Are you willing to be content? And that contentment, in my opinion, comes from a background of faith. Content in my circumstance. Not about how much money and not how much fame. Am I willing to be content right where I'm at? Because that's giving a bigger perspective. You talk about elevating to a different level. To me, that elevates you to say, I'm here for a bigger purpose. And if that's to encourage my other players, if that's to help someone through an injury, if that's to encourage someone in their faith, if that's to walk with someone that went through a death in their family, that's a bigger purpose. And guess what? All those things are happening in the midst of a football, but all you talk about is football. So who's being eyes wide open for those real life situations? Well, it takes being content where I'm at and being aware of who's around me and how can God use that for his glory. So that aspect of seeing a bigger picture, my ratio for success, am I trusting God with my next step? That has precisely been a measurement for my life of trusting him with my bigger picture.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Pro Mindset. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. 5 stars, of course. You can follow us on our website, promindsetpodcast.com, or on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Pro Mindset Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you the next time.